Hello, this is Michael. This is the Dungeon Master for the group that I run with my younger brother and my son and my younger brother's friend Brendan. I thought it might be fun to do a little video kind of recapping the campaign, not just for what's been on my channel here, but also what happened to George and Dragon before the channel started. We've been playing for over a year before the Mad Mage campaign began, when we started with Waterdeep Dragon Heist. So I thought it might be kind of fun to kind of show how the campaign started. It was the very first campaign I had ever run as a DM, so a lot of learning along the way. Not to say that I'm perfect by any means, but just lots of fun and kind of playing with my family. The game kind of started off just me and my son, and my brother decided he'd like to get in on this, and so we joined along with him on originally going through, say, um, Google chat video sharings thing before COVID hit and everything, and then of course later on we transitioned to Zoom, and that's worked well so far since then. Unlike a lot of streaming Dungeons and Dragons things where they might use a system like Roll20 or uh, anything like that, or even just kind of like theater of the mind sort of thing, I do use Photoshop for my maps and things. Like you see here, this is a map of Waterdeep in Photoshop, and I have uh, the this map I found mostly online, and I've gone through and I've added locations and such throughout the map based on resources that I've been, studying and looking at online for what are all these buildings. And of course, most of these buildings are not labeled, but I wanted to make sure that as the group explored Waterdeep, if they passed a certain place and they wanted to go in, I had a name at least, and I could mostly kind of riff on what they were encountering. But probably what people want to see here it really is like, okay, how did this start? And I'm trying to keep this relatively short. So we did Waterdeep Dragon Heist as our first campaign, and I heavily modified it. I definitely used resources from uh, the Alexandrian remix online, as well as just a lot of homebrew as well. But essentially, our characters met on a boat, on a ship, coming in through the harbor here in Waterdeep. They landed here on this dock and had to register in the city at the magistrate's office here. And eventually, they were taken to the Yawning Portal, where the Dragon Heist campaign truly begins. And with the Dragon Heist campaign, the campaign began with a relatively innocuous quest to locate a missing person who's been kidnapped off the street, and they were traversing the city, exploring clues, eventually finding their way to a warehouse. Now, when I first started using Photoshop and such, I didn't have a lot of tokens or anything like that, so I was just using simple dots for the characters and the NPCs and so on. And so this warehouse, they explored the warehouse, they encountered the red dots, which are mostly enemies, and the blue dots, which are kind of NPC allies and things, and they encountered a nobleman named Rainier Neverember. This Rainier character is a nobleman in the city of Waterdeep who became essentially a stalwart NPC companion to the characters for the majority of their entire campaign through Dragon Heist all the way into Dungeon of the Mad Mage. It's kind of interesting how that worked out. With Rainier's help, they went into the sewers, where they eventually were able to rescue the Floon, who had been kidnapped. And through conversations and such, they kind of understood that Rainier uh, was the actual target, and he was Floon was mistaken for Rainier, and so on. I'm not going to try and get too much into the weeds as far as the story goes, but long story short, Rainier's Branderthal Villa is where Rainier lived, and his home was broken into, and nothing seemed to be missing, although a lot of damage had been done. A lot of the library had been ransacked, and a statue had been destroyed. And through investigation and so on, they realized the statue had been hollow. And through using some detect magic and such, they found that this statue had been warded to hide something within it. Meanwhile, they became involved with the Grey Hands, which were headquartered at Blackstaff Tower. They started doing some tasks for the Blackstaff. They also, at Falconmere Villa here, they encountered the Emerald Enclave. They met a druid named Melanor, who in the actual book, Dragon Heist, was kind of a nobody. But in this campaign, I had him become more of an actual adventurer who was asked for assistance. And through Melanor, they actually went down into the first level of the Dungeon of the Mad Mage through this portal, homebrew thing. And actually, I kind of threw in there the Sunless Citadel as kind of a side quest. So here I have maps from Sunless Citadel, just kind of bring these maps back. Here in the Sunless Citadel, they traversed, encountered traps and monsters and creatures, and eventually met a kind of an underground city of kobolds where they encountered a little small kobold named Meepo, which if you've played the Sunless Citadel encounter before or adventure, Meepo is a well-known character from this, and they got through all this, and Meepo tagged along, and I had Meepo kind of be like a little ranger character, and Meepo survived. And so they brought Meepo back home with them, essentially, and Meepo became another companion of the group. And through their adventures in Waterdeep, they eventually managed to obtain their own piece of property within the city, which was Troll Skull Tavern, or Troll Skull Manor, here in Troll Skull Alley, this area here, which became very central as their headquarters. So Troll Skull Manor, very run down and ramshackle, they eventually were able to build it up into a functioning business with a lot of money investment, as well as hiring people. So here's Troll Skull Manor's map. Again, all these maps I found online and just kind of played around with them a little bit in Photoshop, maybe changed some rooms around, added some beds, things like this. And yeah, they really built up Troll Skull Manor from what it used to be. So they all kind of staked out their claim here. They had their own rooms and everything. So a lot of kind of character building, getting in with the Emerald Enclave as a faction, as well as the Grey Hands. They did several side quests and things for those two groups. And eventually the events of Waterdeep Dragon Heist really kick into high gear when a large explosion occurs within Troll Skull Alley. So here's a kind of a zoomed in encounter map for Troll Skull Alley. Here's the manor here and so on. So there was this large explosion that occurred. There were people everywhere. And in the explosion, they found the body of their friend Melanor, the druid. And this was an interesting point in the story where I didn't realize this would happen or anticipate, but they really dead set on bringing their friend back to life. And so they went through a lot of trouble to bring him to someone who had the power to do so, because they were still pretty low level. They didn't really have resurrection abilities. So they brought him with a diamond that they were able to find from the Castellanters. The Castellanters were another rich, noble family within the city. I guess this construction site, it's called a construction site now because it was the Castellanters Villa, which construction site might tell you that something happens later on, but in any case, the Castellanters, they actually give our group the task of, hey, can you help us find the Stone of Golor? Because it's involved in this explosion that happened in Troll Skull Alley. They managed to also find a clue as to what is involved here, and they end up going to Growlhund Villa over here and infiltrating it, and managed to find a stone, the Stone of Golor. Now, they keep it hidden. They don't want anybody to know about this because apparently they realize from those they're talking to, this is something strange about this stone. Meanwhile, the stone has 3 sockets, and it's missing 3 eyes. The eyes of the stone. The stone's missing its 3 eyes. The Castellanters find out the group has the stone, and they want to offer their assistance in finding the eyes for the stone, and they reveal that they actually have one eye already. They've been looking and hunting for these eyes. They want to work with our group to find the missing two eyes that they know where they are, but how to get them. They had one eye. The second eye is being held by Manchun and the Zentarum, a criminal underground group. And then another criminal underground group, the Xanathar, hold the other eye. And they're trying to work together and asking our group to figure out how we can get all three eyes. And with the Stone of Golor restored, they reveal that we'll be able to find a hidden treasure cache that they can then use. Like, what do they get out of it? They can then use this treasure cache to break a curse on their children who are currently enslaved to this kind of demonic Asmodeus cult. And long story, again, I'm going to say long story short a lot, because it's a long story. There's a lot that goes through here. Another faction comes involved, which is Jarlaxle's criminal organization, as our group attempts to find these eyes, keep everything hidden, still working with the Castellanchers, not realizing that the Castellanchers might not be exactly who they say they are, or at least not as benevolent as they seem to be. And just lots of interesting kind of back and forths using, Rainier is involved heavily with his noble background and so on. So lots of back and forth. Eventually, Jarlaxle, who is revealed to be behind the Sea Maiden's Fair Carnival down here. He's got this ability to disguise himself. He has these three large ships in the harbor because Jarlaxle wants to know where the stone is. Jarlaxle kidnaps Meepo, much to George and Draken's chagrin, who they've come to really rely on Meepo as a friend, not so much a fighter. And they go out of their way to really, they storm the three ships that are off the dock of the carnival. They manage to take hold and capture one ship, taking the helm and ramming into a second ship, sinking both, while the third ship, luckily which holds Meepo in it, long story short, they talk their way into getting Meepo back, and Jarlaxle escapes in his submarine, never to be seen so far since then. In the meantime, they do manage to infiltrate Xanathara's lair. So here's Xanathara's lair again, still using all the red dots and things, and they pull some shenanigans in here, and they manage to find the stone hidden within the fish tank down here within Xanathara's bedroom. This fish tank here, there's a little treasure box inside the fish tank. They manage to fish it out, open it up, and sure enough, there is the eye of Golor within, and they manage to escape. It's pretty interesting series of events. So here's the map of Kolat Towers. Kolat Towers, I didn't have a color map for. I just used this at the time. I didn't have much to go off of. They managed to infiltrate using disguises into Kolat Towers, eventually making their way to the extra-dimensional sanctum that was Manchun's sanctum, and man, shenanigans ensued, let me tell you. But they did manage to escape with the Eye of Golor with many close calls. It was quite the ordeal. Polymorphs going on, and invisibility spells, being broken at the most inopportune times, and so on. But it was quite hilarious, but they did manage to escape with the eyes. So they had two of the eyes. Castellanchers, remember, still had the first. And so they concocted a scheme to create a fake eye of Golor, and again, through very well laid plans and very high rolls, they managed to swap their fake eye for the Castellanchers' real eye. And so now they had all three eyes and the stone, and they did not put them together for quite a long time for fear of what might happen. So essentially trying to determine where this vault of hidden dragons is without necessarily using the stone. And eventually, though, they did find the vault. It was hidden within the City of the Dead at the Brandeth Crypts here, going through this sequence of rooms and traps and finding puzzles and things, getting through this underground vault, maps eventually finding their way into the treasure room itself, and of course having to fight a large red dragon, which they barely were managed to survive. And they did, in fact, destroy the dragon. They exited the tomb and found the Castellanters here, having discovered that they had been betrayed. And before the Castellanters could really do anything, the city guard and the Grey Hands and Vajra Blackstaff all appear to come to our characters' essentially rescue as kind of backup. And the Castellanters, seeing that they're outgunned and that they've been outmaneuvered by our players, vanish into the night. And their villa, the Castellanters' villa, catches on fire that night and burns to the ground. And so that's why currently it is a construction site, as in our campaign now, a year has passed since this event, and the villa is being rebuilt into a new structure. So essentially, long story short, that is the first campaign. That first campaign, it was primarily George and Draken, the player characters. Rainier and Melanor were NPCs that kind of helped them out with these different events. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. We played this campaign for, I would say, a good chunk of a year, meeting every week or so online, playing through our internet connections, because my brother and I live right across the country from each other. But my young son at the time, I think he started when he was 9, and now he's 11. We've been playing pretty much consistently ever since. And we went on into the next campaign, which I decided, let's go ahead and let's continue with Draken and George, and let's keep going. So at the beginning of campaign 2 now, which is what I started filming, and the reason why I started filming, recording the sessions and placing them on YouTube, was because when I would do a lot of research, as you can probably tell, I have a lot of stuff here, maps and things, and I couldn't find a whole lot on Mad Mage, Dungeon of the Mad Mage. I found some things, and it seems like a lot of people, from what I could tell, there are a couple exceptions, but there's a lot of people who post anything online regarding their campaigns, like as far as sessions go. They tend to get burned out on Mad Mage, and I thought, you know what, maybe if I post mine, someone else might find them useful one day. So the Dungeon of the Mad Mage, we've actually started in our first session of the new campaign before the week before I decided to start recording. So we had almost like a session 0. And our session 0, the way that worked was, it was a year later. And so I had the players all roll on a table. It was Draken and George. They roll on a table, and on this table was events that would happen throughout the course of this year. Now, at the end of the campaign 1, they had found this hoard of treasure, right? I kind of glossed over that, but at the end of the campaign, they were convinced by the city to give the treasure back to the city because it was stolen from them by Rainier's father, Lord Neverember. And as a finder's fee, they did get I think it was 1%, which was still ended up being a hefty amount of gold. And then they also were able to raid the Red Dragon's hoard, which was a separate hoard from the main treasure. So they got a good 25,000 gold just from that, and then all these magic items and things. So they were very rich, and so I had them roll on a table just to see if anything bad might happen. Like, for example, that this didn't happen, but on the table, if they rolled a 1, I was going to have the tavern burned down, so, for example. So they could have spent that money to rebuild or get another home or whatever. That didn't happen. But so what the events they did roll on were actually kind of fun and interesting. They, again, kind of opened up into story options. So I do highly recommend that if you are going to start, continue a campaign from one to another and have a time gap. Have a table of things could happen, and you're trying to think outside the box, So what they rolled on, what did happen was, number 1, Meepo disappears. So I had on the table any one of their friends, their NPC allies, disappeared if they rolled on it. So Meepo disappeared without a trace, And that was a hefty blow because they had gone through a lot of trouble to rescue him earlier on. So Meepo gone, vanished. Meepo again is a small kobold ally that they had. And then they had Rum vanish. And Rum I haven't mentioned before, but he was their caretaker. He was the owner, or not the owner, but the caretaker of Troll Skull Tavern, the one who they hired to kind of handle the business while they were off adventuring. And so, okay, that's kind of interesting. So now both of these figures had vanished. Another thing that happened was they had managed to find this flying machine, and they said, "Oh, the flying machine crashed and it's destroyed." You know, things like that. So little things like this. So some of it was mostly to kind of be a little bit of a money sink, like they had to lose some money. You know, like all the tavern, you know, flooded, and so they had to spend, you know, 10,000 gold to fix it, things like that. And then, of course, Meepo is gone. I said, well, you've spent, you know, so much money looking for him, and you've tried scrying on him, using magic to find him because he's your buddy, and you can't find him. The scrying magic is failing. And so what you've been told from this, because you know, they don't know how to scry, they had to hire someone to scry, is that the scrying failing means either one, the person is resisting the scry and succeeding at resisting the scry. However, and that's usually what happens if you scry on someone and you roll to see if the person is resisted, if they don't want to be scryed upon. And if they succeed, then you know that they succeeded, that they resisted. However, that's not what's happening here. The person, the wizard that they hired to scry says that he didn't resist it. It's just failing. And so that could mean either Meepo's dead, or he's in some sort of secure place that's magically warded against scrying. Those are the two options as far as this wizard could tell. Rum, same thing. Couldn't find Rum. Either he's dead, or he's in some kind of protected place that's warded from scrying. So this is a mystery that still will actually happen active in the campaign. So if you ever hear Draken and George talking about, you know, Meepo, like literally wanting to find Meepo, which is actually, spoilers, coming up in our next session. I'm probably going to kind of hint a little bit at what Meepo's doing, or something about Meepo. That's who they're referring to, this buddy that they're trying to find. And then meanwhile, over the course of the year, Vajra, the Black Staff of Waterdeep, has become a very close ally of theirs, a very high-ranking official in the city that they are very allied with. So anyway, this session 0 begins, and they've lost their flying machine. They've lost their best friend, and they've lost their tavern manager. So they go through the process of hiring a new one. Also, another thing that they rolled on this table was several thousand gold has gone missing from their coffers. And so they're now suspecting maybe Rum, the caretaker, ran off with this money. Maybe Meepo got involved in this somehow and got caught in the crossfire. Who knows? Lots of speculation. So they lost a little bit chunk of their change. They still had tons of money left, don't get me wrong. And now they have to hire a new caretaker for their tavern. And then the events of Campaign 2 begin with a invasion, Modrons, off to the east side, if I go over here, off out into the wilderness, the farmland around Waterdeep. And so Vajra kind of asks for assistance, and so they go off to see what's going on with these Modrons. You can see here, this is where I started having some actual tokens on my maps for these Modrons and things. I didn't have tokens for the characters yet, but this is George, Draken, and Melanor all being involved in this. Rainier's at home, and fighting off these Modrons. And so this is the counter map for that. I had several different maps for these different Modron figures swarming in, and the characters having to deal with them. Eventually, the Modrons did make it to the river gate here river gate here at the east side of the city, and start flooding into the city. And throughout all of this, they managed to finally find the lead Modron and incapacitate it, and realizing it's actually not a real Modron at all, but a charlatan in some kind of suit. And once this suit has been destroyed, the Modrons seem to go wackadoodle and kind of scatter, and eventually they manage to redirect the Modrons back to where they came from. All that turns out to have been a distraction, as all the walking statues of Waterdeep, you can see here these stars, the Honorable Knight, the Hawkman, the Griffin, all these giant statues come to life and start ransacking the city, sort of stepping through the city and just destroying buildings. It's a huge event, and they're like racing through the city trying to determine what to do and get back to the Blackstaff Tower. And so they're racing through here trying to determine how to stop it, and there's this giant explosion. The Blackstaff Tower is completely obliterated, and Vajra is gone. The walking statues disappear, and this giant voice calls out and says, "Your champions have been chosen." And this little paper bird, which is a magic item, it's like this little flying bird, like origami bird, comes flying in and lands at George the Dragon's feet and unfolds into a note. And the note says, "If you can, find me in Utter Mountain. Signed, V for Vajra." And so their friend, their ally Vajra, has apparently somehow been taken to Undermountain, and they need to rescue her. Undermountain being the name of the Mad Mage's dungeon that is beneath the city of Waterdeep. And it's well known that in order to get to the Mad Mage's dungeon, you go through the Yawning Portal Tavern, which is the Yawning Portal Tavern, in case you're not familiar. One of the maps I found has this giant, essentially this giant hole in the center of the tavern, and people kind of, make wagers and bets and things as far as like adventures going down this tunnel into the Mad Mage's dungeon. And so our adventurers find Rainier, who decides that yes, he's going to help them on this, and he's going to go down and help find Vajra and determine what's going on. So essentially, that's kind of a quick recap of our first campaign. Lots of stuff happened, of course. You can't explain everything that happened, and hopefully that gives a little bit of an insight and idea of what happened before the YouTube videos began. But in any case, hope you're enjoying the campaign. I understand there's a lot of technical things. We're not exactly a professional group here. It's just a family sessions that we're recording and showing for your enjoyment, hopefully. But in any case, even if it seems a little rough, we hope you're enjoying it anyway. And thanks for listening.